The boys have come a long way since they joined our family. The older brother didn't speak for the first several weeks that he was in our home. When he did finally begin to speak, he spoke in a kind of an unintelligible garble for several more weeks. He was so traumatized by the separation from his birth family that it took him almost a year and a half to fully bond with our family. For months and months, he was just despondent. Today, I'm happy to report that he laughs, makes friends, and acts like a typical 9-year-old. You can go on to the next page. Under our care, the newborn got over his medical problems quickly. He bonded with us quickly as well, and today he is truly thriving. He is now a very bright, happy, healthy kindergartner. The next one, please. And one more. We've now been together 6 Christmases. They've been in our household over 5 years. When we started in this process, my boys were really too young to understand what adoption means. The week before the trial, I felt it was necessary for them to understand what was going on. So I sat down with both of them to explain that we were going to adopt them. They didn't really understand at first, so I took out 3 pieces of paper. I wrote my full name on the first piece of paper, and each of their full names on the other 2. And the older one gave me a worried look. He had just learned to write his name, and he was thinking, boy, I have to learn a new name already. Anyway, I took the younger of the 2 and we began to trace the name on the paper, his new name on the paper. And the older one began to write down his name on the paper. And by the time he got to the 3rd copy of his name, he looked up at me, and on his face was pure contentment. He said, Poppy, we're all going to have the same last name. That's going to make us a family. An hour later, that kid was still writing out his new name over and over, just as happy as could be. So even though they're that young, they understand. They have some concept. On November 26, 2008, Judge Cindy Lederman ruled the ban unconstitutional and granted our adoption of the 2 foster children. Just minutes later, lawyers for the State Attorney General's office were submitting their appeal, effectively putting a stay on our adoption. Thankfully, the children have been allowed to remain in our home during the appeal. Last August, during the hearing for the appeal, the state made it all too clear what is at stake for our boys. One of the judges asked the state's counsel, "Are you seeking to reverse the adoption altogether?" The state answered that if the court allows the ban to stand, the state would immediately get a court order to remove these kids from our home, and they would be made available for adoption. The judge took pause, and then he asked, would permanent guardianship be an available option? The answer from the state's attorney was, no, I don't think it is. To that, there was an audible gasp in the courtroom. I felt my own heart drop. Early on in the process, we had been told by our children's own adoption caseworker that sibling groups are especially hard to place, and that if we could not adopt the boys, the older of the 2 brothers was not a good candidate for adoption because he was already beyond the age that most adoptive parents would consider. By splitting them up, he said, it would give his younger brother a much better chance of being adopted. On the very first day those 2 brothers were placed with us, I went to give the baby his bottle. The older brother grabbed the bottle out of my hand. So I decided, okay, this is important to him. I sat the baby down between us and let him hold the bottle while the baby took the formula. When the bottle was about 2/3 empty, he grabbed the baby, slung him over his shoulder, patted him on the back, and the baby burped. And you know, he knew better than I did how much milk that baby was going to drink, and he knew just how to take care of him. A little bit later, I went to change the baby's diaper, and he was right there behind me, and then he tried to push me out of the way and do it himself. I held the baby and let him finish. He had that baby wiped and changed in about 30 seconds. Folded the diaper neatly and threw it in the trash can. I explained to him, of course, that's our job. We're the caretaker here. Children get to play in this house. Anyway, he was just 4 years old, and it was obvious that he'd been feeding and changing that baby on a regular basis. It was a neglect case, which we were told, and at the tender age of 4, he had truly become his brother's keeper. Okay, the next one, give them about 5 seconds or so. There's several, but just give them a little time to go on. Because of the adoption ban, my boys are not only at risk of being taken away from their 2 dads, their homes, their school, their teachers, their friends, their grandmothers, their uncles, aunts, and their dog and cat. That's my niece there. And that's Grandma. You weren't expecting a slideshow. That's my sister, my mother. That's our dog. That is the most gentle lab you'll ever meet. The older of the 2, for whatever reason, is especially nurturing. He's always taking care. He took care of his brother, and now he always wants to take care of our pets. He found that kitten when it was this big in our backyard, and we had to feed it by bottle, and he did that for us. He insisted on doing that for us. Okay, what is worse than all of the above? Taking them away from their family. For me, the most impacting thing is that these 2 boys who have always been together would most likely have to be split up. The lives of these 2 young boys would be completely devastated. What is ironic under the current law is that how in the state of Florida they would fulfill the goal of permanency for these 2 young children by splitting them up. Thank you for allowing me to share our story with you.